Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Hips News. We'd like to say hello to all the hipsters out there in podcast land. And today we pose a question, a subject matter that is very important, but somehow doesn't have an answer or multiple answers that people tend to state. Did you know that at one time the Earth was one big landmass, very different to what it looks like today? After several millions of years, it dispersed and broke up until we got the continents that we have today. As you know, that on all these continents coming from one landmass, there were all mostly one nation, one empire, or one people, which was called the people of the sun, or the landlords, or the people of the land. And they were all melanated. So even if we were talking about from one part of the world to another, these people tend to roam and occupy these places. I'm Vessel 1, and with me Vessel 2. Vessel 2, would you like to add anything to it, or how are you today, first of all?
All is well in the kingdom, Vessel 1. I appreciate this show as well. We should be posing questions to see what kind of responses we get. And I think the videos that we selected cover a lot of the subject matter as well. I look forward to breaking it down for the peoples.
So do I. And with that, let's get into it.
To me, hidden in plain sight.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Wake up.
Hidden in plain sight.
Vessel 2 and I are about to pose these questions, and people out there in podcast land, if you have some idea or also interested in digging into this episode of questioning the understanding of the whole melanated people of the world. This is a question that's posed, or that has been in many interests. Some people have been somewhat taken a backseat, or even have lack of knowledge, or claiming that they're from one place or the other without due diligence of really understanding of what they have. So Vessel 2, if you don't mind, would you like to pose half of the questions so we can get started?
Sure, no problem, Vessel 1. Yeah, this one goes out to the diaspora, the melanated folks out there. We just posing a couple questions, no judgment, just wanting to see where we stand as a people who have been spreaded throughout the globe. First question we have is, what makes you an indigenous person? Whether it be Indigenous American, or just an American, or a indigenous person to the landmass in which you are born upon. What makes you indigenous to that landmass? Another question we pose is, what makes you Black? Whether it be Black American, Afro Black, African American, what makes you Black? We just throwing these questions out. So if anybody can help us along the way with these questions that we're posing, then we'd appreciate it. Leave comments below. Yeah, the question is, what makes you a Black American or an African? Is there a difference between the two?
That black isn't beautiful. It isn't ugly. It isn't kinky hair. It isn't straight hair. Black is just black.
Third question we have is, has the straight out of Africa myth been solved? What are the roots and origins of the melanated people? And does having dark skin ultimately mean you're African? Now, everybody has a different shade of melanin in their skin. So what determines you as an African based upon your skin complexion?
Correct. Stuff happens that you don't want to happen. I all of a sudden became an African. Political correctness. African American. I'm not African. An American. I'm not African. An American. I'm not African.
Yes.
And
I think these.
go ahead, Veswa.
Continue. I think these are valid questions and questions that most people are really interested in. And so, again, Vessel 2 has laid out the questions in front of us of this episode. Any other thoughts, Vessel 2?
Yeah, we have some more other questions on hand that we kind of trying to get answers to. We got some titles that, you know, might spark some interest. One question that we're posing also is, what are the benefits or the bonus of claiming Native American versus African American? Is there a benefit claiming either or? Another question that we're posing is, what are the benefits of melanated Americans claiming African heritage? Another question we posing is it our older generation claiming African heritage causing our younger generation to claim African American? And then last but not least, who has the right or obligation of unifying all dark-skinned people to claim them deemed as Africans or having African heritage? Who's obligated to do that?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. Yeah.
And then we also want to know, just throwing this out there, are there pros and cons of being Black living in America or being Black living in Africa? Are we from two different continents with two very different people, cultures, and heritage? These are some of the questions that we're posing. We're not trying to persuade the conversation either way. It's just, we want to know, is there a collective answer to these questions? So that would be the subjects we cover today on today's show. And as I stated, leave comments, let us know your opinion, where you stand. If you have any answers to these questions, we would be more than happy to read through the comments and reply to you, and hopefully open this door of conversation to the diaspora. First question we have is, what makes you an Indigenous person? Whether it be Indigenous American or just an American or a indigenous person to the landmass in which you are born.
Can I just end with this one thing? These four brothers sitting here, we didn't all come from Africa. And there was a there was a country before 1492, and our history goes way beyond 1492. So you can't start us at 1492. We were always here.
What makes you indigenous to that landmass? Another question we pose is, what makes you Black?
If we want to speak about, the collective power of Black people, well, what are you talking about? Do you mean the collective power of African people? You mean Pan-Africanism or then say African. I don't understand why people are so wedded to the term Black. And the justification for it is, well, it's because the European made it negative. It's the Europeans' word. It was negative before it was applied to African people. It's like they're getting it backwards. It isn't that Europeans said, we're going to make this word Black negative in order to accommodate our desire to devalue African people or dark-complexioned Asian people or dark-complexioned Native Americans. That's not how it worked. The word Black, right, absence of light, if you will, was supposed to be understood by any English speaker as largely negative before it was applied to people of African or Asian ancestry. Dr. Akbar, the prominent African-American psychologist, often talks about one of our issues is that we have become, we meaning people of the African world, whether it's the continent or more especially within the diaspora, so-called Black folks, are very reactive rather than proactive, which means that if this individual is calling himself white, we're going to react and call ourselves Black because we're the opposite. Not really understanding that we're not exactly taking a step in the right direction because now, as I like to say, given all the linguistic and cultural baggage of Black, you are trying to push an elephant uphill on roller skates. You're trying to turn a negative into a positive when there's a clean, pure stream nearby to draw from. If you're referring to complexion, in fact, there's a famous scene in the movie Cry Freedom about the life of Steve Biko. The presumption is that this event actually occurred. If it didn't, it still made sense in terms of the screenwriters and Richard Attenborough putting it into the film. And that is, Steve Biko was in court. He's charged with basically, being seen as a threat to the apartheid system, and he was banned. So he's in court talking to the European judge, the Boer British judge, and the judge says to him,
"Why call yourselves Black? I mean, you people are more brown than Black."
And Biko says,
"Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white."
And the judge goes,
"Precisely."
But there's no deeper unpacking of what just occurred. And it raises an important question about systems of oppression.
Whether it be Black American, Afro Black, African American, what makes you Black? Third question we have is, has the straight out of Africa myth been solved? What are the roots and origins of the melanated people?
because there's some kind of onslaught going on against, Black consciousness YouTubers, if I can say that. So make sure that you like their videos and share them so that, we continue to battle those algorithms that may not be working in our favor. I really wanted to bring this this topic to your attention because, we've started a relocation service, free plug, definitely check out the links below where if you're seriously relocating to Africa and you need contacts, you need links, and you need that on the ground information, definitely consider joining. But one of the things I've received a lot of emails from, our African American brothers and sisters, some saying, they're staying. They're not going anywhere. That is their land. And I think it's very important for us to open up the discussion that, not all African Americans came from Africa. That is one of the greatest fallacies that has happened. We were a global melanated planet, which means we were absolutely everywhere, on every land, in every country, in every continent, the countries they created. And, there's been so much that's been done because it's a mental reality, it's a mental world. There's so much that's been done to corrupt and rewrite the story, especially when you see the pictures of who they say the native Indians were. But, the Americas were actually it was like Africa. It was a melanated continent, beloveds. And the ones that were taken out looked like you and me. And there are some that were also brought from Africa, and they came and they looked for very specific people from the African continent. But the Americas, there's many of you, beloveds, who you are the native Indians. You are the Native Americans, and that is part of the inheritance that you have been, disenfranchised from. And I know I got a lot of people emotional when I said you shouldn't be waiting for reparations, because you shouldn't. You are custodians of the land. 40 acres and a mule just ain't gonna cut it. But it's time that we start to recognize, because you see, what they've tried to do is separate the melanated people so that we think that we existed in silos, or so that we think we're all different. But we are the original ones. All over the planet, we took on our different characteristics and personalities. The Aborigine in Australia are the original ones. They're related to I and I, beloveds. The Black people, I don't even want to call them Africans, because then, they tried to hold us into one nation. But we were a global community, beloveds. And that's why we as a melanated people need to start looking at this as it really is.
Okay, let's go back and use the discipline of history. We're going to start in 1091. Let's go back to the land area that sets up the coming of the ancient Egyptians into Spain. That land area that I'm talking about is Egypt. And to the west of Egypt is Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. Those 6 countries border the Mediterranean. So in 1091, the year 1091, when a European white people of Spain who asked the ancient Egyptians who lived along the North Africa bordering the Mediterranean, the countries that I just mentioned, asked them to come to Spain to bring civilization to them. Ask, A-S-K now. And the ancient Egyptians living and bordering the Mediterranean, those countries I just mentioned, they used a country called Morocco to make their departure into Spain. The reason why they use Morocco is because in Morocco you have the Strait of Gibraltar, which is closer will get an individual closer to the shorelines of Spain. At the end of the Strait of Gibraltar, you have to take a boat and travel 8.9 miles before you reach the shore or the shores of Spain. Once in Spain, those Spanish-speaking people called the African ancient Egyptians that embarked on a journey to reach Spain through the country called Morocco and that strait. And once in Spain, the Spanish people began to call them black Moors. Now, black Moors, black and Negro is synonymous, one and the same. And so, mind you now, Moor is a nickname. That's what it is. A nickname given to the ancient Egyptians by the uncivilized European whites, people of Spain, who asked them to come to Spain to bring civilization to them. Well, see, I never said that our ancestors were the first people on this planet Earth, so anybody tell you that is misleading you. I said that our ancestors, those Africans living in the continent of Africa, in a country called Egypt, they were the first civilized people on planet Earth because of their alphabet that they created in Egypt. And that alphabet is the first thing you learn when you go to school, your ABCs, and your ABCs, after learning that, will make you literate because you'll be able to read, write, and spell. And along with that civilization came the invention of mathematics, of all forms of mathematics, and that enabled them to build the Great Pyramid, the greatest monument that's ever been built on planet Earth. So, no, I didn't say that they were the first people on Earth, because no human can tell you who was the first people on Earth, because no human can tell you how they got here as human beings. To make that point.
Does having dark skin ultimately mean you're African?
Which means what? Black folks. You never find a white aborigine. Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine.
This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, around the age of 5 or 6 or 7, to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you.
Now, everybody has a different shade of melanin in their skin. So what determines you as an African based upon your skin complexion?
I think these are valid questions and questions that most people are really interested in. Vessel 2 has laid out the questions in front of us of this episode. So we're going to kind of see if we can get some idea and a breakdown of this.
My name is Mr. Maya. Videos about black people around the world, and the main aim behind my channel is to clear misconception about Africa and also clear misconception about all black people around the globe. So what Africans think of African Americans, and also what African Americans think of Africans. And I keep on receiving comments on this video, and I feel like I need to voice this out. Why do most of you hate to be called Africans? Why do you guys get angry when somebody calls you African? We hate to be called Africans because Africans sold us.
Brother, you on the air? What's your disagreement?
Hey, sorry, I actually just came on while the guy was talking about talking about the Hebrew Israelites, about Africa.
Are you one of them?
I'm from Africa, and I've actually written a paper about the Hebrew Israelites in when I was in college about in my anthropology class.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed is, like, most Black Americans, they tend to try to deviate away from their West African ancestry. But what they forget is all this slavery thing has been recorded. And in our oral traditions where I come from, they still talk about the slavery, how it happened. So I know people would not want to hear the history, but the reality is it was like the weaker tribes. The weaker tribes were preyed upon and sold into slavery. Because if you go back and look at the 17th century Ashanti expansion in Ghana, present-day Ghana, when they were expanding, going towards their capital called Kumasi, they sent almost 1 million people into slavery. And I know people always say Africans sold their own people, but it's not the same groups of people because
they're tribes.
It's like, it's like a Chinese, like you cannot call it Japanese and Chinese are not the same people.
Hell, Japanese and Koreans, they're not the same. Philippines. So you're right. That's what I was trying to tell him. They're different people. So how did he decide which one was the tribe of, because he said the other people were from Ham, and I guess the other people were Turkey, and the other people were.
No, because during that time, you have the Ashantis on the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana. They were the stronger tribe, and you have the Fantis. The Ashantis would capture tribes like Apollonia, Dagomba, and give them to the Fantis, and the Fantis would sell them to the white people for guns, alcohol, and clothing,
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that, because if you're the real Israelite, you don't have to tell people that you're the real Israelite. Just live as the Israelite and show people that you are the Hebrew.
Right. Why do they have to keep saying the real?
Yeah, you don't have to, because I know their idea of when they talk about Egypt. Black people in America are not from Egypt. They are from West Africa. The tribes that were closer to Egypt were the Nubians and the Cushites. Nubians are the present-day Sudanese. They don't even look anything close to West Africans. They are slender and much darker and taller. West Africans are thicker and more muscular. Completely different looks, different culture, different language.
Oh, look at the difference between the Sudanese. What is the name of that tribe where all the people are like 6'5" and 6'6"?
The Dinka.
Yeah, those dudes are huge.
Yeah, the Dinka. So if you look at it, the Atlantic slave trade concentrated from Angola, Congo, Ghana, Nigeria, all the way to Gambia, along the coast. That's where that took place. And that history is still there. When you go to those places, you're going to see the forts that were built specifically for this slavery.
Since the late 1630s, the people of color in America have been struggling with the actual account of their true identities. After being labeled a race of people under certain classifications based upon skin hue, the complexity of learning their background, heritage, and culture was relied upon the Western European settlers that won the hundreds of war invasions that took place immediately in the year of 1492 and beyond. The inability of governments of America and Europe to come to grips with their dark past and allow the Aborigines, who are natives to the land of America, as well as the descendants of everyone else involved, the healing required to move forward is not only a denial of basic human rights, but a telltale sign of the type of current racism, economic neglect, and mistreatment that will surely come to light during this generation of life. The threads of these ancient cultures of the Aborigine people, having existed here for tens of thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans, must be preserved, strengthened, and woven back into a quilt that tells the unique story of not only their past, but of their bright future as well. The reasons for this runs much deeper than one may assume. One reason being, we have thousands of ancient history records, artifacts, tombstones, and hieroglyphics, etc., all in Africa. But to really put the full puzzle together, one must learn the facts of the actual counts of the Aborigines of America, because they are the direct ancestors of the now called African Americans.
So we're going to kind of see if we can get some idea and a breakdown of this. So if you bear, stay tuned.